What's going on YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to be building a complete sentiment analyzer application using machine learning right inside of Xcode. So we're going to learn how to train a real machine learning model that can understand natural language and use it to analyze text sentiment directly in our iOS application. We're not using Python, TensorFlow, or anything, just Swift, SwiftUI, and Core ML or machine learning. And by the end of this tutorial, you'll have an app that can instantly tell if a sentence or caption is positive, negative, or neutral, built completely from scratch, and ultimately also learn how to use SwiftUI to build components that help us display the results about this data with this awesome pie chart and this overall sentiment score that we see here. So this sentiment analyzer is actually the first project from my new AI and machine learning for iOS course. And in this course, we build 4 complete AI and machine learning powered applications. And the link for this course is in the description, guys. Right now, you can get a discount on this for 20% off this week only with code EARLYBIRD. Or you could become a member here with us at AppStuff for just $42 a month, and you get access to all of our pro courses and pro app clones, including the fundamentals as well. So check out all of our courses online at appstuff.io. Check out the full AI and ML course, and I really hope you guys enjoy this free preview that we're giving you here where we build the first of 4 applications. I'm going to be adding a bonus application as well with an expense tracker that uses AI. And this course is really just incredible, guys. It uses both machine learning, Apple Intelligence, and real AI with like integrating the OpenAI APIs and stuff like that. So make sure you check that out. Enjoy this one, and let's go ahead and get started with Xcode. What's going on, guys? Hope everyone's doing well. In this video, we are going to be going over our first machine learning application that we're going to be building in the course. We're going to do a quick demo of the application, and then we're going to get our project set up, and that's going to wrap it up for this video. So it's going to be pretty short and pretty sweet. So before we do a demo, let's talk pretty quickly about what machine learning is and how we're going to be using it in an iOS development context. So machine learning is a powerful and versatile tool that lets you create app experiences that can accomplish more with less effort. So machine learning essentially uses models to perform tasks such as natural language processing, which is what we're going to be doing in this application, image recognition, and text recognition within images, which is what we're going to be doing in the next application, predictive analysis, and more. So these models learn by analyzing patterns in a large amount of example data, which is a process called training the model. When the model is given new input, it attempts to provide an accurate output based on the examples it has already seen before. The more examples you use to train a model, the more accurate its responses are likely to be. So given that information and introduction to machine learning, what exactly is this application doing and how is it using machine learning to do that? So basically, I have this application analyzing sentiment or processing natural language to produce some sort of sentiment score centered around a given topic, right? So the topic here is the future of AI in software engineering and how it's going to affect developer jobs, right? So basically, this acts as a forum where a bunch of people give their thoughts, and we use machine learning to analyze each response and give it an overall sentiment score. So for example, let's look at this first one. Last time we tried an AI code generator, we spent days fixing subtle bugs and chasing compliance issues. I'm not eager to trust it with critical code. So this is an overall negative sentiment surrounding the future of AI, right? Let's look at a positive one. I enjoy tough engineering challenges. If AI takes the grunt work, we can spend more time on architecture, performance, and user value. This is a positive response. And then here's an example of a moderate response or sort of a neutral response. There's a helpful AI completion in my editor that I like, but I don't need it to write entire features end to end. So basically, we look at all of these responses, analyze the sentiment of each response using a machine learning model, and then we pool them all together in this graph and then generate an overall sentiment of this given topic. So this could be extremely helpful in applications where you're looking at reviews or people talking about a given topic to analyze sentiment about that given topic, or if you just want to analyze individual pieces of text, right? So we overall get like an overview of how many positive, moderate, and negative responses, and then display all of this information in a graph. So it's a pretty put together application. We're going to be using charts, machine learning, and SwiftUI to build this out, and it's going to be really exciting. And here, guys, I can go and add my own response. I don't think AI is going to replace developer jobs anytime soon. And if I hit done, it will insert that response and add it to the top of the list and then automatically adjust my sentiment overview or analysis there. So it's super, super cool. And like I said, we're going to be using machine learning to analyze each one of these responses and generate an overall sentiment. So that's the overview of our application here. Let's go ahead and get started with setting up our project now. So with Xcode opened up, let's go ahead and create a new project, guys. And we're going to select iOS app and we're going to hit next. And I'm going to call this Sentiment Analyzer Tutorial. And we do not need a testing system and we don't need any storage either. So let's go ahead and hit next. And we are going to then hit create. So we're just going to get our project folder structure set up here. Let's see, create. There we go. And then we are going to move on to coding in the next video. So I always like to get my project directory set up so that I'm nice and organized from the jump. So guys, in our app, our root app folder here, let's go ahead and make a file or folder for our app file. We're going to stick that in there. Then we're going to make a core folder. And within that core folder, we'll have a root, which is where our content view will go. Then I want us to make a resources folder, which is where I like to put my assets. And we're going to make one more folder here, and this is going to be called our models. So this is where we're going to put all of our machine learning models and the data models for our application and stuff like that. So in our root content view, let's just go ahead and make sure that our preview gets up and running before we jump into the next video and get started with building out this awesome application. Sweet. All right, guys. So we are good to go. That's going to wrap it up for this video. In the next one, we're going to get started with the actual implementation and building out this app. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Let's get excited. We'll see you there. Peace. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. In this video, we're going to be getting started with the data modeling for our application. So that's going to include some of the objects that we're going to be using to display information and also the machine learning component of the application that we're going to be using to analyze the sentiment of each individual caption or text. So let's go ahead and go into this models folder. And the first one we're going to create is a response. So this response model is going to be what populates each one of these response cells here. So it's going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to have a struct that we're going to call response. It's going to be identifiable. We're going to create an ID. And then we are going to create a text variable, or sorry, it could be a constant. It's not going to be editable. And then we are going to create a score as well. So this score is going to be ultimately what determines the sentiment, and we're going to build out a machine learning component that analyzes this text and gives it a score. Okay, so we are also going to have some sample responses, guys. So I'm just going to go ahead and paste those in here. And you guys do not have to sit here and type all of this out. This is available in the source code for this lecture. So just go to the resources section and you can download that and grab the sample responses, or you could use ChatGPT to generate some yourself or type them out yourself. It's up to you. So that's our response model, guys. Next up, we are going to create a model for our sentiment. So we're going to create a new Swift file, and this is going to be called sentiment. And this is going to be the data model for the overall sentiment score or structure for each response. So as we can see here, we have three different sentiment types. We have positive, moderate, and negative. So I'm going to use an enum to do this. So we're going to create an enum called sentiment. And this is just going to be a string enum here, guys. And we're also going to make this plottable. And we are going to need to import charts for that. And that's because ultimately we're going to be plotting our sentiment data. So we're going to create our three cases, which is positive, positive, Man, I can't spell positive to save my life. Case moderate. And case negative. Cool. And guys, we are going to initialize this with a score. So our sentiment score that will ultimately be analyzed by our machine learning model will be used to determine if it's positive, negative, or moderate. So here's how that's going to look. We're going to say we want to initialize this with a score, which is a double. And here is our logic. So we're going to say if the score is greater than 0.2, then we're going to say self equals dot positive. And we're going to say else if our score is less than negative 0.2, we're going to say self equals dot negative. And then we are simply going to say else self is equal to dot moderate, right? So this score, like I said, will come from our machine learning analysis, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. So next up, guys, we need an associated icon for each one of our sentiments. So positive is going to be like these up arrows, negative is down, moderate is just like a minus sign. So we are going to have an icon here as well. And here's what that's going to look like. Chevron.up.2 for positive, chevron.down.2 for negative, and minus for moderate. And then we're also going to have a sentiment color. So this is going to be the associated color for each one of our sentiments. And it's pretty straightforward to see how that works in each one of our result rows here. So in order to get that to work, we need to import SwiftUI, guys. And I believe we can delete our foundation model import. And let's go ahead and hit Command B to build this just to make sure our build succeeds and everything is good. And that looks great. All right, so the next one is where things start to get fun. We are going to build out our machine learning score model. So what we're going to do is go to our models folder, and we are going to create a Swift file, and this is going to be called our scorer. So this is going to be in charge of analyzing our text and producing a sentiment score. So guys, we are going to import something called natural language up at the top. So this is a model or a module that is used for analyzing natural language, just simple text like we see here. So I'm going to create a struct here called my scorer, and I'm going to create a tagger to start things off. And this is going to be a natural language tagger. So this is going to be something that analyzes natural language text. And we're going to use tag schemes of sentiment score here. You can see some other stuff that they have. It could be language, class, script, sentiment score, token type. So, there's a couple different options that we have here, but we are going to be using sentiment score, and we can see in the documentation a scheme that scores text as positive, negative, or neutral based on its sentiment polarity. Perfect. So this is built into Apple's foundation models, or sorry, not foundation models, but it's a built-in Apple API that we can use to analyze natural language. So we're going to make a function here to score our text, which is going to be a string, and it's going to return a double. So we're going to start out by saying our sentiment score is a double and it's equal to 0. And then we're going to say tagger, and we can attach a string property to our tagger, and we're going to set it equal to the text that we pass in here. Perfect. And we're going to say tagger.enumerate tags in. And here is where things get interesting. So this enumerates a block over the tagger string, giving a range, token unit, and tag scheme. So we're going to say enumerate tags, and we need to give it a range. So we're going to say text.start index, and we want to go all the way up to the end index. So this is going to analyze the complete block of text. And our unit, if we say dot, we are just going to want to analyze a paragraph here, right? Because these can be multiple sentences. We don't want to analyze an entire document or just one sentence or just one word. So we're going to use the paragraph option. The scheme is .sentiment score. And we are going to hit enter on this block. Property tag, we don't need the range because we are looking at the entire text body. And here's our code. So we're going to say if let sentiment string is equal to our sentiment or tag.raw value, and let score equal double sentiment string. We're going to say that our sentiment score is equal to that score. Let me expand this a little bit. And here, guys, this has to return a Boolean variable, so we'll just say return false. And at the end of this function, we are going to say return our sentiment score. And then we'll break down how exactly this works. Okay, so essentially, guys, we are creating this natural language tagger with this scheme of analyzing sentiment score, right? And then we have a function here as part of this model that will produce a score for us for a given piece of text. So we set that text on the tagger, and then we enumerate those tags. So basically, this gives it a way of breaking down the text component with a given range, a specified unit, and a scheme. So then the result comes back in this closure. It's interesting that this is not using the async await functionality. It does come back in a closure to us. I would hope to see this get refactored into async await, or have an async await option or a Swift concurrency option. That would be cool. But anyway, for some reason, this natural language tag raw value comes back as a string. So we have to check to make sure it's there and then cast it as a double before we ultimately return that score. So the way that this works, guys, is it's going to hold a string like 0.73 or negative 0.42, right? And ultimately, that's going to be our sentiment score. And then we are going to use this to initialize our sentiment enum. And based on the score that we get back, we will set this up as positive, negative, or moderate, right? And the reason we return false here is we want this to stop after we analyze the first paragraph, right? So if for some reason we have multiple paragraphs in the text, we only want to analyze one paragraph at a time for this given example. So after we do that, we're just going to return false and then return our sentiment score. So the sentiment score is a property we initialize up here so that we can return it outside of this closure, and that we ultimately then don't have to have like some sort of escaping completion handler here, which would be annoying, right? Or just a little messy. So that's our score, and that's going to wrap it up for this video. It should be pretty straightforward to understand how we're going to use this now. So each response is going to have a text and a score associated with it. And then we are going to use that to build an overall sentiment, which we've modeled out using this enum, and like classify it or categorize it as positive, negative, or moderate based on the score we get back from our machine learning score value. So that's going to wrap it up for this video, guys. In the next one, we are going to get started with building out the user interface for our application, and then ultimately integrating our data models into the user interface to bring this thing full circle. So get excited for that. We'll see you there. Peace. Quick intermission here, guys. Once again, this app that we're currently building is part of the complete AI and ML course for iOS, and you can check that out on the website at appstuff.io. So in this course, we build 4 complete applications that combine both AI and machine learning to produce intelligent app experiences. So you guys can either purchase this for a one-time purchase of $169, or you can become a member with us. And for just $42 a month, you can get access to not only this course, but all of our other pro courses. So that includes courses on interview prep, fundamentals with things like Swift concurrency, advanced fundamentals with Swift and SwiftUI, and our awesome pro app clones. And if you guys want access to the source code for this tutorial, you can get access to that from the link in there's a link in the description for that as well. And this gives you access to not just the source code for this project, but all of our other YouTube projects. So everything I've ever done on YouTube, if you guys want the source code for all of that for a one-time fee of $59, you can get access to all of the YouTube source code, not just from previous videos, but all future videos as well. I continually add code and videos to this. So if you guys want access to everything we've done on YouTube for a one-time fee of $59, that's a great deal. Go ahead and check that out. The link for that is in the description as well. But one more time, guys, the full course here is available on our website, where we build 4 complete machine learning and AI applications. I'm going to be adding a bonus app as well that utilizes Apple Intelligence to help us track and manage our expenses. So that's a bonus app that's coming later. But once that app comes out, the price of the course will increase. So make sure you get in on this course now, or by either becoming a member or just doing a one-time purchase. So let's go ahead and get back to the video, guys, where we are going to continue building our sentiment analyzer. What's going on, guys? Welcome back. In this video, we're going to get started with building out the user interface for the application here. So I want us to hop into the content view, and we're just going to jump straight in. So let's get our preview up and running. And we are going to start by wrapping this up in a navigation stack. And within that, we are going to do a scroll view. And actually, sorry, we are going to do a VStack first, and then put the scroll view inside of the VStack. So the reason for that, guys, is because we are going to have sort of a floating text field here at the bottom where people can add their thoughts to insert a response, right? So inside of the scroll view, we're going to have just a text component. We're going to say, here's our chart. And then we're going to have another text for overview section. And then we're going to have our list of responses, right? So let's go ahead and just do for each, and we'll do like 0 up to, but not including 10. And we could say response in, and let's just go ahead and say text response. And see how that looks. Okay, we actually need to say just like, yeah, put it in quotes to make it a string. So this is the basic layout of our scroll view. And next up, I want us to add our text field at the bottom. So let's go ahead and within our VStack, but outside of our scroll view, if you guys want to make it clear where the scroll view ends, you could fold up that last bracket. Oops, that is not going to work. We need to do this guy. Let's go to the top and hit fold. There we go. So this makes it much clearer with what's going on in our UI layout. We are going to create an H stack here because we're going to have a text field, and then next to it, we're going to have a done button. Okay, something's going wrong there. Okay. Some reason that got undone. All right, so now let's make our text field, guys. And we're going to do this one with title key, text, and axis. So let's just go title key, text. I guess you could do prompt and axis. So the prompt is going to just be your thoughts on the future of AI. Our text, we need to create a state property for that. We could just call it like response text. Make it a blank string. Response text. We don't need this prompt. And our axis is going to be vertical. And we are going to give it a line limit of 5. Oops. That line limit 5. We don't want the response to be too long. And that should be good. Okay, and then next to that, we are going to have our done button. So we're going to just say button done. And then here, we're going to just say add response. Cool. And then we are going to add some padding here. So let's just go ahead and say dot padding. Sweet. All right, so we're going to want to give this text field like a clip shape of maybe a capsule. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to give this an overlay of a rounded rectangle, or we could do a capsule, sorry. And we're going to then say dot stroke. And we're going to give it a color of dot system gray 4 and a line width of 1. Okay, and we need to just adjust our padding a little bit here, guys. So on this text field, first off, let's go ahead and highlight this and hit Control M, and then highlight this and hit Control I just to clean everything up. Here, we're going to give this a padding of 12 pixels, right? So that definitely looks better already. And then I want us to remove this padding at the end of the H stack. Let's just sort of work from scratch here. And we can actually just go back here and add that as horizontal padding, right? So this looks much, much better. And then, guys, let's go ahead and test this out. So actually the simulator doesn't let us do that. We are going to add another padding of leading and 4 pixels. And then on our done button, let's go ahead and give this a font weight of .semi bold, just because I think that's definitely a cleaner implementation. And let's go ahead and run the application really quickly just to see what all of this looks like. Let's type into the text field and make sure that user experience is of good quality there. And there's actually going to be something interesting that shows up that I want us to fix in terms of a UI related issue. So let's go ahead and pop into this text field. And one, we can see that it's really hugging the keyboard, right? Like this is something that we only see when we actually run the app and launch the keyboard. So we're going to want to give this HStack some padding on the bottom edge as well. So let's go ahead and do that. And another issue, guys, is let's go ahead and start typing into this text field. So when you type on your computer keyboard, that goes away. So as we can see here, once we get to like line 5, or beyond that, it looks like the line limit isn't working, which is fine. We don't really need that. But you can see that this clip shape is not looking good, right? So this is what happens when you use a capsule clip shape. It sort of like gets kind of buggy. Or not buggy, it just doesn't look good with how tightly the border is constricted around the text, right? No matter what kind of padding you add, you really just can't fix it if the text field grows large enough. So what we're going to do to fix that, pro tip here, is we're going to replace this with a rounded rectangle with a corner radius of 25. And we're going to go ahead and rerun this, and we'll see that that issue is no longer there. So that was something that drove me crazy for a little bit, because when you look at production ready messaging apps, that is definitely not how it looks. And I was like, how do I fix this, man? So now if I start typing a bunch of lines, and one, let's launch our keyboard, we can see that we now have more space there, which looks really, really good. And here, guys, we can see that the border is maintained in a much cleaner fashion now, right? Like it keeps that sort of text box look, and the border doesn't start to infringe or bleed into the text. So that's it for the UI for our input view there. That's looking good. Next up, let's go ahead and build out these response views. This is going to be pretty basic and straightforward. And we're going to make a separate component for that. So in our root folder, we're not in the root folder. Let's go ahead and, you know what? Let's just put it in here. It's not that deep. We're going to go and make a SwiftUI view. And guys, this is going to be called our response row view. You could call it response cell, response row view, doesn't really matter. So now we're just going to build out this little view that we see here. It's pretty much just a rectangle with a text and an image next to it, right? So the only thing we want to do is make sure that we pass in a response here. And here we could say response, and we could use our mocks. We could say response dot sample responses 0. And that looked good. Now let's go ahead, and this is going to be an HStack. Let's see. Okay, this is an array of strings. So we need to actually construct a response here. ID, text, and score. So here we'll say uuid.uuid string. Text is response.sample responses 0. And our score, we could make it 1.0. So that's our mock response there. And guys, we are just going to have a text component with our response.text. And then next to that, let's just add a spacer. I believe that's what we're going to want to do. Just to make sure the space maintained there is constant and consistent. And then we are going to have an image with a system name of response.sentiment. Ooh, we did not add a sentiment to our response. So we need to connect our sentiment to our response model. So how do we do that? So let's hop back into our response really quickly. And let's just make a computed property here. We're going to say var sentiment, which is of type sentiment, and it's going to be equal to our sentiment, and we're just going to pass in the score from our response, right? So we can just make this a computed property. We have access to the score on our response when we create it, and then we can compute the sentiment based on that score. So now we have all of the sort of UI related information on that sentiment object. We're set up for success here. So all we need to do is say image system name response dot sentiment, because that's now attached, dot icon. And then we just need to add some modifiers to it, right? So we're going to say dot frame width is going to be 30 and height is going to be 30 as well. So let's just modify this really fast. Dot foreground style is white. And then we're going to say dot background. And we're going to say rounded rectangle, corner radius of 8, dot fill, response dot sentiment color. And that looks good. Next up, guys, so let's actually just go ahead and get a preview of this up and running. We pretty much need to just give it this sort of background and border now, right? And we're going to put the main background on sort of like a system grouped or gray background, and then this will just be white. So let's see, that just needs some padding. So on our HStack, let's just go ahead and say dot padding. And let's go ahead and make the background color equal to like a system background color. So basically, guys, like I don't think I have dark mode set up properly in this. Yeah, so that doesn't look good. We definitely want to make sure that we account for both light and dark mode here. So let's go ahead and give this a background. We can just, I believe I say system background. So let's say color dot system background. Cool. So now what I want us to do is go back to our content view and create these response row views. So in our content view, we have this for each loop here. And then we want to loop through our sample responses, right? So instead of just 0 to 10. So actually, let's create a state property for our responses. We're going to say state private var responses is equal to an array of responses. And we actually have to make them rubber meet the road here and create this response array, because if we look back, our response in our response model, this is just an array of strings. We haven't actually gotten to the point of computing the score for each response yet. So we actually need to do that. So we're going to create an array of responses here, and we're going to loop through this array of responses. And we are then going to say that we want to create a response row view and pass in that response. So now, how do we actually populate this with data? So guys, let's see, responses. On our navigation stack, we could add a task. And the reason I'm doing a task here, guys, is because this would probably be coming from some sort of API, and you would want to use some sort of asynchronous function in this task. You could also use onAppear for this example, but I think it's a good habit to use a task just to simulate real life behavior in an actual application, because this would most likely be coming from an API, which would involve a network request. So we're going to just say for response, in response response dot sample responses. Damn, I cannot spell response. There we go. We are going to make a function to save a response. So let's go ahead and make a private extension on our content view. And make a function here to save a response. So this is going to be a reusable function that we can use whenever the user hits done and wants to add a response, and we can also use it to construct and create our responses here. So we're just going to say we have some text, which is a string. And let's go ahead and open up our brackets. And we're going to say we want to make sure that we create a scorer object. So we're going to say let scorer equal our scorer. And we're going to say let score equal scorer dot score, that text that we pass in. And then we're going to say let response equal this response uuid.uuid string. Our text is the text we pass in. Our score is that score. And then we're going to say responses.append response. Okay. Now, guys, we can go here and say save response and pass in that text. And check that out. Looking really good, right? So next up, guys, I want us to give this view a background of like a system gray background or system grouped background. So on our V stack here, we're just going to go and say .background, and I'm going to say color.system grouped background. So now we can see our response views sort of standing out a little bit more, right? And that definitely looks good. And we just want to give this some more padding on the horizontal edges to make them look like they're like these little card views or cells, right? So to do that, on each one of our response row views, we can just go ahead here and say .padding.horizontal. And that looks really, really good. And guys, the only other thing I want to do here is give this guy a corner radius. So back in our response row view, let's command click into that. We can just go ahead and give this a clip shape of .rounded rect with a corner radius of 10. It doesn't like that, so let's just go ahead and see rounded rectangle. Just like that. And now we should be good. Let's go back to our content view and see how that looks. Perfect, man. That's a beautiful user interface there. Actually, I like this. It's a little tight on that top edge, but honestly, I think it looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and run the app just to see what that looks like, because the preview's keyboard is all jacked up. Xcode really needs to fix that. This is the Xcode beta still. So let's see here, guys. I click on that. Let's expand the keyboard with Command K. Yeah, you know what? I want some more padding on the top there. So on this H stack here, we had horizontal and bottom padding. Let's just go ahead and add an all-around padding there and run that again and see what that looks like. It should just add some padding on the top edge as well, just to make our spacing nice and clean. So much better. This looks like this nice sticky sort of like input view, and we launched that and that looks great. And to wrap this video up, guys, I want to make sure that when the user actually types something in here and hits done, it adds a new response. And we want to add that response to the top of the list. So that's a nice, tricky little problem. I want you guys to maybe pause the video and see if you can figure out how to do that yourself. So when the user types something in and they hit done, we want to make it so that it adds that response to the top of the list. And as a bonus, I want you to see if you can make it so that the done button is only enabled if the user has entered text into this text field. So go ahead and pause the video and see if you can fill in that or implement that function and then add it to our done button action handler here. Okay, so if you paused or not, let's go ahead and just implement this now. So guys, we're going to say that we want a function here called onDoneTapped or something. And we need to look at the response text, right? And then reuse this helper function of saving our response. So what's that going to look like? So we want to say guard response text dot is empty else return. And we could do some more complex like string handling here, like empty spaces and all that stuff, but that's just not necessary for this example. We're just going to make sure we have a non-empty string for purposes of simplicity. And then we're going to say save response text. And then we're going to say response text is equal to a blank string to reset it. And that should be good to go. So next up, the problem with this is let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. Well, let's say on done tapped. We need to make sure we call this function here. So right now we are appending responses to the end of our list, right? So this would go to the bottom of the list, which is not what we want. So let's just verify that. Test response here. Done. So we see that it goes all the way down to the bottom. It has a negative sentiment, which is kind of irrelevant here, but that's just how it got computed. But we want to make sure we add that to the top, right? So how do we do that? So we can do one of two things. We can say that we want to replace this with an insert, right? So we could say responses.insert new element response at 0, right? We could do that. So the problem with this is when we initially save our responses, like this insert function is pretty expensive from a computational standpoint. So we definitely don't want to do this when we're initially adding our responses to the list, right? We can just initially say that, hey, we want to append these items and we don't want to have to insert everything. So here's a visualization of what that would look like. So the first time this runs, the array is empty. So we're going to have R1, right? And then after it runs again, it's going to say, okay, we need to insert R2 here and then R3 here, so on and so forth. But every time you insert a new item, it has to push all of the other items to the right, one index, right? As opposed to just appending items where if it was R1 at the beginning, then R2, then R3, so on and so forth. That is an instant operation. That doesn't require any sort of time complexity from an algorithmic perspective, right? So inserting is definitely more expensive, and we only want to do that when we have new responses, not when we're loading the initial responses. So let's just add a Boolean property here called should insert, and we'll say bool is equal to false. We'll give it a default value. So then we're just going to go here and say if should insert responses.insert response at 0, else responses.append response, right? And then when we say done tapped, we will just go ahead and say should insert is true. So that's just a workaround that improves our efficiency from a time complexity standpoint quite a bit here. This is such a small amount of data. Obviously, it doesn't really matter that much, but you want to make sure that you are keeping this stuff in mind when you're building software, because you want to build software that scales, right? You don't want to build software that has performance inefficiencies in a bunch of different places in your application that eventually will add up to large performance inefficiencies and ultimately make your app perform like crap, right? You will have laggy scrolling, heavy CPU and memory usage, slow load times, and all kinds of bad stuff. So this is how senior engineers think. And it's always good to flex these muscles in these types of problems, no matter how small, right? Because that will just become the way that you do things. So guys, if you want more practice with data structures and algorithms or interview prep, in our courses on appstuff.io, you can go to the interview prep section, and we have a full course on data structures and algorithms, and also things like system design and general iOS theory and concepts. So check these two courses out. And if you want to see more stuff like this in practice at a high level, check out our Pro Plus course series. These are courses that teach you how to build production-ready applications that can handle millions of users at scale. So we break down concepts like that, like we just did, in high levels of detail to show you how important application performance is as an app becomes larger and scales to more users and having more complex features and things like that. So on that note, let's go ahead and make another performance improvement here. What we're going to do is look at this function, and we see that we're creating an instance of our scorer object every time we save a response. So this is definitely a massive inefficiency here because we only need to create a single instance of this. And when I say single instance, I don't mean that we need to use a singleton. That's unnecessary here. We can just create a state property here up at the top of our content view with our scorer, like so. And that way we have a single instance of this in this content view and don't need to create it every time we want to save a response. So if we had 10 responses, we were creating 10 instances of our scorer model, and that's just completely unnecessary. Now we just create one, and that will exist throughout the entire lifecycle of this view. So that's another massive performance improvement there. Let's go ahead and run our application just to make sure this works as expected now. Okay, so we are up and running. Let's just go ahead and make a test sample response here. sample response about AI. Done. Okay. And check that out, guys. It's all the way up at the top. That is beautiful. And to really make sure that this is working, let's go ahead and look at our sample responses. So let's go to models response. And the order that we see here should be, I think, the order that we see these things coming back. So the future of AI makes me excited. Yes, that's right there. I don't mind smarter tools. Yes, that's right there. So these are successfully going through these sample responses one by one and appending them to the end of the array as we see here. Whereas like if we had the insert operation for these sample responses when we were creating them in the content view, this one would be at the top. It would sort of be in the reverse order, right? So that's looking really good. Definitely some awesome performance improvements there, and just overall good theory on how to make sure that you're optimizing performance in your applications and thinking about these types of problems and not being a lazy programmer that will ultimately build slow and crappy apps, right? Like you don't want to be that. You want to be a good programmer that builds good apps and makes a lot of money, right? So thanks for watching this one, guys. Hope you enjoy the content. Once again, make sure you check out our other courses on appstuff.io if you want to learn stuff like this at an even higher level and really learn how things are done at the highest levels in the game at companies like Meta, Google, Uber, Tinder, and stuff like that. So thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video. Peace. Alrighty, guys. Now it is time to build out our pie chart that is going to give us a visual representation in the variance of our responses. So in our root folder, let's just go ahead and make a new view. This is going to be a SwiftUI view, and we could call this response pie charts view. So we need to import charts up at the top. We are going to be using the native SwiftUI charts API to build this out. And we are going to initialize this with some responses. So we're going to say let responses be of type response, or an array of responses. And then here we're going to go responses, and we're just going to do an empty array. And next up, guys, we are going to just immediately get into building our chart. So we're going to create a chart here, and it's going to display our response data. So we're going to say chart with responses and then response in. So next up, we are going to create a sector mark. So we are going to say that we want to create a sector mark here with an angle and an inner radius. So we're going to select angle and inner radius, and the angle is going to be a value, and the label key is going to be type. And for the value, we're just going to do 1. And then the inner radius is going to be dot ratio of 0.75. So basically what that's going to do is that sort of defines like how thick these lines are with this inner radius ratio. So the inner radius is the radius of the inner circle here, whereas the outer radius would be the radius of the outer circle. So when you set the inner radius, it sort of just defines how big the donut hole is going to be essentially. So that's what that ratio does there. Let's go ahead and clean this up a little bit. And the reason we are doing 1 as the value instead of our response.score, which you could do, is mainly because the response scores are all between 1 and -1. So that would look kind of weird. If you just normalize them all out to 1, it sort of comes together correctly. So next up, guys, we are going to give this a foreground style. So we're going to say dot foreground style by dot value, and that is going to be our sentiment. And that is going to be our response.sentiment as the value. So this is how we're going to configure the colors of the chart. We are going to group it or organize it by the response sentiment, right? Because we want the positive sentiment color to match the positive sentiment icon, right? So that's how we want to organize and structure this. And then we're going to say dot chart foreground style scale. Oops, we need to do that here. And we need to create a dictionary here. So we're going to say for sentiment dot positive, we want our sentiment dot positive dot sentiment color. And we're just going to do this for each one. So sentiment.negative is going to be the negative color. And then we're going to do moderate as well. So that's sort of how we configure our chart foreground style and scale. So next up, guys, we want to place this icon in the center of the chart. And there are two ways to do that. We could either use a Z-stack or use the chart background modifier and use a geometry reader and stuff. Honestly, it's easier to use the Z-stack, but the chart background modifier with the geometry reader gives you more customization ability and ability to like sort of scale the image. So you could do either one. For this example, we're just going to go with the Z-stack. So let's go ahead and hit Command X on our entire body, cut it, make a Z-stack, and then we're going to place the image on top of that Z-stack, or on sort of on top of the chart, and it should position itself in the center. So we're just going to say image, system name, and I just did a location image. Like I couldn't really think of a good image to use for this, so I just picked a random one. It is nice to have an image in there, or some sort of value or text that just says what the chart's about. And we're just going to give it a resizable modifier, and we're just going to say .frame width and height. Let's see, frame width, height, and we could go like 48 by 48 and see how that looks. And next up, guys, we are going to then configure our chart legend. So that's how we can see this legend over here. SwiftUI gives us a built-in modifier for that, which is pretty cool. So we're going to go here and say .chart legend, position and alignment. So we're going to put it on the trailing edge and in the center. That's how we get that there. And you could play around with some different options based on what your preferences are there. And overall, this thing is going to have a frame, or sorry, a height of 200 pixels, and we're just going to give it some padding. So that should be it for our chart view, guys. It's pretty simple to put a chart together with the SwiftUI Charts API. It's pretty awesome. I'm super glad that they released that. I think it was in iOS 17. And now we can go back to our content view and replace text chart with our actual chart view, or response pie chart view, and pass in our responses. So let's go ahead and run our preview and see how that looks. And then the last remaining thing will be building out our overview section and performing some calculations to figure out what percentage of the total responses each sentiment is, right? So here we currently have 43%, 14%, and 43%. So, okay, this does not look as I expected it to. So I think we're going to go with the chart background modifier. And we can see here, guys, that the chart has the segments all scattered, right? So there's some debugging we need to do here for sure. So let's go into the response pie chart view and let's add our chart background modifier. So we're going to undo what we did with the Z-stack. That just does not look right. And we're going to add a chart background. And we have our proxy that gives us access to sort of the sizing of our chart so that we can dynamically base our overlay around the size of our pie chart and the dimensions of it and such. So we are also going to use a geometry reader to help us. And we're going to say geometry in. And we're going to say if let anchor equals chart proxy, or yeah, proxy dot chart frame or plot frame. And let frame equal geometry with using that anchor. Then here's how we're going to structure our image. We're going to say we want image system name, location, dot resizable, dot frame. Height is going to be frame dot height times 0.4. And then we're going to say dot position is going to be x frame, dot mid x, y frame dot mid y. So this gives us a lot more flexibility, as you can see. We just need to use the combination of this chart background proxy and our geometry reader proxy to figure out the positioning of the chart and the frame that it's inside of. Let's see. Why is that not working? Initializer for conditional binding. Oh, this is not an if let. That's my bad. So guys, we are just going to we got to adjust this a little bit. So delete this frame or copy or cut this line here and just bring that bracket up to the top and delete that comma. And then we're going to say let frame equal geometry for that anchor. And right now it looks all kinds of jacked up. That's because there is no chart data here, right? So we can just go back to our content view. And let's see what this looks like. Okay, we definitely did something wrong. So let's go back to our response by chart view. We have resizable, and let's make the content mode scaled to fit. There we go. Simple fix, right? So now if we go back to our content view, our chart's going to look a lot better, but we have to fix the random segmenting of our values here. So really quickly, this definitely has something to do with how we set up our sector marks. So we can do one of two things. We can sort all of our responses by the score, and it will group each one of these things together. Or we could go and try to adjust the value so that it's not, each value isn't set to 1, right? As you can see, each one of these segments is the same size, and that's because we set the value, let's go back to our chart view, to 1. So let's see what happens if we set it to response.score and go back to our content view. So definitely better, but still not where we need it to be, right? Like this is not grouped together properly. So what we're going to do, guys, is in our response by chart view, we're going to make a custom initializer. So we're going to say init with our responses, and we're going to say self.responses is equal to responses.sorted by 0.score is less than 1.score. So it's going to sort them in ascending order. So from smallest to biggest, you could do from biggest to smallest as well, just so long as they're sorted. It's going to act as like a grouping. So now all of the negative values will sort of be chunked together. The positive values will be chunked together, et cetera, et cetera. You need some sort of grouping mechanism with these pie charts, or else the data will just be scattered. So let's go ahead and go back to our content view, and we will now see that that looks amazing, right? So another way to do that would be create some sort of like pie slice data model where you pass or you map your data into sort of that data model for the pie chart, and you can group things that way. But using this sort is another way of accomplishing the same thing. So that's going to wrap it up for this video, guys. In the next one, we are going to get into building out our sentiment overview section, where we're going to analyze the overall sentiment of each response and make sure this modifies and updates as new responses get added. So for example, pay attention to this. This is a test sentiment. AI rocks. Let's go ahead and hit done. And you guys will see that this instantly updated, right? We have 8 responses now, moderate here, and that all of this stuff updated in real time as we add new responses. So get excited for that, guys. We will see you there. Peace. Quick intermission here, guys. Once again, this app that we're currently building is part of the complete AI and ML course for iOS, and you can check that out on the website at appstuff.io. So in this course, we build 4 complete applications that combine both AI and machine learning to produce intelligent app experiences. So you guys can either purchase this for a one-time purchase of $169, or you can become a member with us, and for just $42 a month, you can get access to not only this course, but all of our other pro courses. So that includes courses on interview prep, fundamentals with things like Swift Concurrency, advanced fundamentals with Swift and SwiftUI, and our awesome pro app clones. And if you guys want access to the source code for this tutorial, you can get access to that from the link in there's a link in the description for that as well. And this gives you access to not just the source code for this project, but all of our other YouTube projects. So everything I've ever done on YouTube, if you guys want the source code for all of that for a one-time fee of $59, you can get access to all of the YouTube source code, not just from previous videos, but all future videos as well. I continually add code and videos to this. So if you guys want access to everything we've done on YouTube for a one-time fee of $59, that's a great deal. Go ahead and check that out. The link for that is in the description as well. But one more time, guys, the full course here is available on our website where we build 4 complete machine learning and AI applications. I'm going to be adding a bonus app as well that utilizes Apple Intelligence to help us track and manage our expenses. So that's a bonus app that's coming later. But once that app comes out, the price of the course will increase. So make sure you get in on this course now, or by either becoming a member or just doing a one-time purchase. So let's go ahead and get back to the video, guys, where we are going to continue building our sentiment analyzer. All right, guys, now it is time to build out this overall sentiment section. So this is going to basically summarize all of our responses and give us back an overall sentiment. We see here that it's currently mixed and moderate. It's going to display the total number of responses that we have, and then a percentage within these little like pill views that give us the percentage of each individual sentiment, positive, moderate, and negative. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So in our root folder, let's go ahead and make a SwiftUI view. And it's going to be called Overall Sentiment Section. And we are going to use the group box feature here. It just makes building some of this out a little easier. So we are going to create a group box. And we're going to say that we want content and label. And just go ahead and hit enter on that. And our label is what we're going to start with. We're going to create a label that says Overall Sentiment. And we're going to use a system image of chart.py.fill. So let's go ahead and run our preview, and we need to go ahead and add some text. Content goes here. So this is like the benefit of using a group box, guys. It can just easily position some of this stuff for us. So I use this from time to time when it fits the needs of my UI. So next up, let's go over what we need to inject into this view. So we are going to need to pass in our response data to this view, and then we are going to make some computed properties and do some calculations to figure out how to display all of the relevant information about those responses. So let's just go ahead and pass in, or say that we want as an input parameter our responses, which is an array of responses. And here we can go and create this array. We can just say like .init, UUID, .UUID string, text, test response, score, 0.5. And let's just make like 2 more. And let's give one like negative 0.2 and give another one like 0.1 or something. So those are just some simple test responses. And like I said, we are going to be computing some data based on these responses that we get back, right? So first off, guys, how do we know our overall sentiment? So let's go ahead and make a private extension here for our overall sentiment section. And we are going to make a variable for our overall sentiment, which is of type sentiment. And we are going to say guard responses.count is greater than 0, else return no. So this is actually going to be optional because our responses could be 0. And now we need to figure out how to compute this overall sentiment, right? So what's the logic behind this? This is going to be a nice, interesting little data structure or algorithm problem that we need to solve. So basically, if we have more positive sentiments than anything, we know that our sentiment is overall positive. And that holds true for any of the other sentiments, right? So basically what we need to do is look at the count of each one of our sentiments and then figure out which one is the greatest of all those counts and then compute the overall sentiment based on that. So once again, the logic is if right now, my overall sentiment would be positive because I have 2 positive sentiments because the threshold was greater than 0.2, 1 negative sentiment, let's make it like 0.3 actually, and then 1 moderate sentiment. So we need to figure out how to construct an algorithm here that helps us compute that overall sentiment based on the data that we have in this data structure. So I want you guys to actually pause this video and see if you can figure out how to do that. This is once again a really, really awesome exercise in data structures and algorithms that are actual problems you have to solve as an iOS engineer on a daily basis when you're building software. So it just goes to show you that data structures and algorithms are important. They are relevant. So I want you guys to go ahead and see if you can pause the video and figure this out. All right, guys, so I'm going to sort of walk through the theory of this solution and write some comments in the code for how we're going to solve this problem and some of the data structures we're going to use before we just jump into the code. So this is something I like to do with every sort of algorithm that I need to solve. I like to map out the solution in my head and sort of get a foundation for it or a blueprint of the solution and then start coding. It makes the coding part of it a lot easier. So I know that I need to track the count for each sentiment, right? So I need to have some sort of mapping of a sentiment and then how many times that sentiment shows up in this data source or this array. So I'm going to use a map to do that. So we need to create map or create and populate map with sentiment counts, right? And then after that, we need to find the maximum count in that array, or sorry, that map, and then that will give us our solution. Right? So then we need to find max count and return that sentiment as solution, right? So let's go ahead and create this map. So this is a pretty simple algorithm. I would rate this as easy level. But if you guys don't know how to do this stuff, or if you are not comfortable with data structures and algorithms, this is going to be very difficult, right? So that's why I recommend taking my data structure and algorithms course or my interview mastery course, guys. And once again, that's available on appstuff.io. The link for that will also be in the description. So let's go ahead and create this map. So we're going to say var map, and it's going to be of type sentiment as the keys and ints as the values. And we're just going to create a blank dictionary here. So next up, we are going to then loop through our results. Responses. So we're going to say for response in self.responses, and we're going to say that the map of that response dot sentiment default 0 plus equals 1. So this is how we start incrementing the count of each value. So basically it would go here and it would start looping through these responses. And this one is positive. So it's going to say, okay, now our map has a positive sentiment of 1 as the count. And then it goes here and it says, okay, now we have another positive sentiment. So the positive sentiment now has 2 values there. And then it's going to go here and it's going to give negative a count of 1 and here moderate a count of 1. So here's ultimately what our map would look like at this after it goes through that array. It would be positive 2, negative 1, moderate 1, right? So next up, we need to find the maximum value in this array. It's obviously 2, but how do we do that programmatically? So it's going to be pretty simple. We basically want to loop through this map or this dictionary, find the max value, and then return the associated key for that max value. So let's go ahead and figure out how to do that. So we first need to keep track of a maximum value, right? So we're going to say max value, and we're going to set that to 0. And then we need to keep track of our result as well. So we're going to say, a sentiment. And this is going to be optional. And we're ultimately just going to return that result here. Okay, so next up, what we're going to do is loop through our map. So we're going to say for key value in map. We're going to say max value is equal to the maximum between the value that we're looking at and the current max value, right? So it starts at 0 and then it's going to go into the first iteration and it's going to say, okay, the new max value is equal to the maximum between 0 and 2. Let's make this max value and value. So 0 and 2. So it would be the max value between 0 and 2, which is obviously 2. So the new max value is now 2. And then we're going to say if the max value is equal to the value. After we do that, we're going to say result is equal to the key associated with that value, right? So the next time it goes around, it's going to say, okay, the key is negative, the value is 1. The max value is now equal to the maximum between 1 and 2, which is still 2. And this if check won't even run because the max value here is 2, the current value is 1, so the result will not get updated, right? So that looks really good there, guys. There's a much swiftier way of doing this. Like we could actually accomplish this in like 2 lines of code. So I'm actually going to show you how to do that really quickly and show you a much swiftier way of accomplishing the exact same thing that we did here. But this is the overall theory behind how to solve this problem. So what we can do, let's just comment this stuff out. We are going to say let counts equal, and we're going to create this dictionary, and we're going to use this grouping constructor. So we're going to say grouping our responses by our sentiment. So we're going to say \sentiment, and then we're going to say .map values of the count. So let me get this away here for a second. Yep. Okay, so this creates a dictionary by grouping the responses by their sentiment and then maps the values with the count of each one of those. So this basically does the same thing that this did right here, right? So we don't even need this anymore. And then we can just say return counts.max by, and we're going to say 0.value is less than $1.value .key. And believe it or not, that is literally all we have to do. We can comment all of this stuff out as well, and we could just have this be these 2 lines of code to compute our overall sentiment. And here we're just making sure they're non-empty, right? So let's go over what exactly this is doing, and then we'll get into building the UI, which will be the fun part. But we had to compute and figure out all of our data in our results first, right? So guys, this creates our dictionary by grouping our responses by their sentiment. And then we map the values in accordance with the number of times that they appear, which we get this built-in function to do that from Swift, which is really, really cool. So ultimately, this single line of code gives us back our dictionary, which is what we did in this couple lines of code and writing a for loop and stuff like that, right? And then we just take those counts and we compute the max, and we get back the associated key from that maximum value. And this is the logic behind how that max is computed. So all of these 2 lines of code does exactly what all of this code did before. So I definitely like to understand both ways of doing things. Like you won't understand this if you don't understand how all of that stuff works. Basically, what these built-in functions are doing is essentially the same thing as we did here. So that's our exercise in data structures and algorithms for the day. Hope you guys enjoyed that. I personally find this stuff really interesting and challenging. So if you want more practice with that, on our website at appstuff.io, we have our interview prep courses, and you can check out data structure and algorithms or iOS interview mastery. If you want a super deep dive into DS and DSA, this is the course. If you want all things interview related, iOS interview mastery is the way to go. So go ahead and check that out, guys. You can become a member here with us for just $42 a month, and you can get access to both of those courses and all of our other pro courses and fundamentals courses as well. So we have a ton of stuff here on the website where we build out full app clones. We also have fundamentals with stuff like Swift concurrency, programming fundamentals with Swift, intermediate and advanced fundamentals, networking, concurrency, all of that fun stuff. So make sure you guys go ahead and check out the website at appstuff.io with all of the content that we have to offer. So now that we've done that, guys, let's go ahead and just build out the UI for this, populate it with our data, and we'll be done with this awesome machine learning application. So we're going to go up here, and we are going to, within our group box, start this off with an if-let statement. We're going to say if-let overall sentiment, and then we're going to say else. So if we don't have an overall sentiment, we're just going to say that we want a text that says no responses yet. And if we do have an overall sentiment, right, like we actually get a result back from this, let's go over how we're going to build this out. So basically, guys, we are going to create this. So we already have, let's see, bring our preview back in. we already have that sort of overall sentiment title. So what we need to start this off is the actual result here and then the number of responses that we have. So we need to create a label for our overall sentiment. Let's just go ahead and do the UI first. So let's go here and we are going to say that we want a label, and here we could just say like leaning positive for now. And then guys, we are going to add a spacer. Well, let's go ahead and style this first. We're going to say .font is .headline, and we're going to say .foreground style is our overall sentiment .sentiment color, right? And then we're going to create a spacer, and we're going to say text. And here's going to be our total responses. So we're going to say responses.count responses. Pretty straightforward. And yeah, that looks good. And we are going to also create a system image here, guys. We're going to say system image, and I think we could just say like hyphen for now. And that looks good. And then we need to figure out these little pill views, right? So we're going to create some sort of like sentiment pill. So let me just go ahead and create a struct here called sentiment pill, which is a view, var body, which is some view. And we need to pass in our sentiment here, which is a sentiment. We also need the count, which is an integer, and the percentage, which is an integer. So we are going to have our sentiment, the percentage value of that sentiment, and actually it doesn't look like we need the count here. Yeah, we don't need the count, just the percentage. You could include the count of each one if you want, but I think the percentage is just fine. So guys, we're going to create a VStack for this, and within that an HStack with a spacing of 6 pixels. And we're going to say image system name sentiment.icon. Image scale is .small, and then text, our sentiment.raw value, .font is .caption, .font weight is semi-bold. And then after that, HStack, we're going to say text, and here's going to be our percentage for each one of those sentiments. .font is going to be .caption2, .foreground style is .secondary. And then we are going to give these some padding modifiers. So we're going to say we want a vertical padding of 6 and a horizontal padding of 10. So this is just how we create sort of the spacing for these pills. And we are going to give this a background of our sentiment color with a very, very light opacity. So one sec, my beach ball is spinning. So let me go ahead and copy and paste this guy in here. So we're going to say sentiment.sentiment color.opacity of 12% in a capsule shape. And then we're going to give it an overlay, which gives us that nice, like, strong border there. And that looks good. And then we're going to give it a foreground style of our sentiment.sentiment color. So now, guys, we have this reusable sentiment pill, and we can go back up to our section here, and we can now create each one of these sentiment pills. So we're going to have after that, so after this, like, let's see, was this supposed to be in an HStack? Yes. So we need to wrap this up in an HStack. And that looks good, sweet. And then we're going to give this some padding on the bottom. And then we're going to create another HStack with a spacing of 16 pixels. And we're going to create our sentiment pills. So we're going to go here and say that our sentiment is .positive. And our percentage, we need to compute this value, right? So let's go ahead and make a computed property for this down in our private extension. We're going to say that we want a function, or sorry, it's a function, percentage for sentiment. And we want that to return an integer. So we're going to say guard responses dot is empty, else return 0, right? So we want to make sure this is non-empty. So let's negate that. And guys, we actually need to have a reference to our map here, right? So right now, this sentiment mapping of each one of our individual counts only exists within this overall sentiment computed property. So we're going to need to extract that to compute something like our percentages for that. So let's go here and say var sentiment map, which is of type sentiment and integer. And here, we are just going to grab this single line of code. And here, we are going to return sentiment map dot max by all that stuff. So now we have reference to our sentiment map from outside of the scope of this computed property, which is exactly what we need. So now, guys, we are going to say let count equal our sentiment map for this particular sentiment. And the default value can be 0. And we are going to return this. We want this to be expressed as an integer value. So here we're just going to say responses.count. So basically we are going to round up the double of the count and that, the result of the count divided by the number of responses, right? So if I have 2 positive responses and I have 5 total responses, we want to divide 2 by 5, round that value up if it's not a whole number, and then multiply it by 100. So that's just a simple calculation for how we can compute our percentage. So next up, what we need to do is pass that into this guy. So we're going to say percentage for dot positive. Why is that yelling at me? It shouldn't be. Okay. And then we just need to do that for each one of our sentiments, guys. So we're going to say negative, negative, moderate, moderate. And if we want it to be even more swifty, we could loop through all of our sentiments. So that would save us the trouble of having to individually create these pills. So let's go ahead and do that. We can say for each sentiment dot all cases. So it looks like our sentiment does not conform to the case iterable protocol. So guys, let's go ahead and use Command-Shift-O to quick open this file. And we're going to say we want to go to sentiment.swift, and we are going to make this conform to case iterable so that we can loop through these cases. So this is more efficient because if we ever add or remove cases from this sentiment enum, it would all be resolved in looping through each individual case as opposed to the current setup that we have here. For example, if I removed negative, I would then have to come here and remove this value myself. Whereas if I just loop through everything, like this sentiment in, I know that I want to create, let's see, let's go ahead and take this here, put it here. We want an H stack, and then we are going to have our sentiment pill with that sentiment, and the percentage will be the percentage for that sentiment, right? So that should work. Let's just make my beach ball go away and see if that all comes together. And I really love making those little improvements, man. It just it gives me satisfaction to know that I'm writing clean code. I don't know if that makes me weird or if you guys feel the same way. But yeah, this is definitely much cleaner. That makes our code easier to scale, maintain, and debug and all of that stuff. So let's see. Believe it needs to conform to identifiable as well. So let's solve that problem. So we can just go ahead and make this conform to identifiable, and we could make a var ID string, and that could just be the raw value. So let's go back here and see if our plan, our evil genius plan worked. Drum roll, please. Hopefully the preview doesn't take forever to load. Yes. Guys, that looks awesome. So good. Let's just give this group box some padding at the end there. And this looks incredible, man. We should be proud of that. That is some high quality code right there, boys and girls. So let's go ahead and drop this overall sentiment section into our main interface. And that's going to wrap up this awesome little machine learning app. Okay. So we're going to replace overview section with our actual overall sentiment section and just pass in our responses. Dude, this is super, super clean. I'm proud of the code we just built. We not only implemented some awesome machine learning that you guys could use for all kinds of things in apps that you build yourselves, but we had some fun with some data structures and algorithms and solved some really interesting problems and built an awesome UI. To me, a tutorial just doesn't get better than that. We got to combine so many fun and challenging things into one, and I hope you guys enjoyed this. And guess what? It's just going to get better as the course goes on. We're going to do even more complex and fun things with machine learning and even AI. And I can show you guys some of the apps that we're going to be building throughout the remainder of the course. And once again, those are available in the full AI and ML course, which is available on the website. The link for that is in the description. And guys, we can check out this awesome trail analyzer application. This is one that is going to utilize actual data, and we're going to train a machine learning model to analyze that data to ultimately generate predictive analysis on how difficult a trail will be for us to hike based on these user inputs. So that's super, super cool. Another one is we're going to be building an AI social application. So if we check this out, we're going to be using AI to help us not only talk to a user, so I can say, hey, what's up? This one is going to utilize Apple Intelligence to generate responses to us, right? As we can see there. And it's also going to use the OpenAI API to help us modify captions. So I could say something like working hard today, and I could use AI to emphasize my caption. And this is going to reach out to the ChatGPT API to give us back an emphasized caption. And then we would be able to post that and see that at the top of our user feed there. So we have some really incredible applications we're going to be building out throughout the remainder of this course. So make sure you guys check that out at appstuff.io. And once again, you guys can become a member for just $42 a month if you don't want to pay the full price of that course. And you get access to everything, the source code, all of the video tutorials. There's no gimmicks. You can cancel anytime. You get a certificate of completion, and you guys not only get access to that course, but all of our other courses as well, including things on interview prep, fundamentals, and our amazing pro app clones. So make sure you guys check out all that stuff. Thanks for watching this video. We'll see you in the next one, guys. Peace out.